being in such a dark, toxic place in my own life that as much as I tried on my own power and as hard as I wanted to change and do things in my life that I didn't think were possible, people often say that God doesn't let you go through anything more than you can handle, but I found that to not be true. Um, for me, He purposely let me go through way more than I could handle. So when I don't want to say I escaped because I want to say because when I was rescued, that way I would know for 100% without a doubt that it was all God. It was because there's been certain things that I couldn't change in my life that He just took from me, and I'll just put it out there. Just addiction to alcohol and drugs. I spent a lot of my life from the time I was 13. I had my first drink. I fell in love, and from then I was throw some drugs on that, and that feeling got even more better, and just compounded and compounded. And what seemed like such great things in my life that made me feel good, like physically or in the moment, I guess. What I wasn't seeing at the time was how much I was actually like suffering. That's why I can really look at the words when people like one of my favorite quotes I've heard recently is like some people think of God like He's just this punisher, you know, and they're like, oh, if you sin, God's gonna punish you. And for me, it hasn't been like the salvation that comes from Christ is not something that I look at like way down the road, some hypothetical thing like after I die, like Jesus is gonna come swoop in and pay my debt for me, or like I get to eat all this dinner here and then He's just gonna pick up the tab when I get back. It's the hell that I was living in each and every day. Like, um, I wasn't being punished for my sins. I was being punished by my sins. The regret and the doubt and the emptiness and the word I started out with was desperation. I mean, I was just, that was my life, was just desperate to not feel the way I was feeling to the point where I couldn't do anything for myself. And He got me so humble and to my knees so bad that I finally had to just literally just throw up my hands and just was like, all right, I surrender. If I lose everything, I mean, I had a family, house, car, good job. I mean, I was pretty much going to lose it anyway, and I had to go away for a while, go to treatment to get myself taken care of, and it was scary, and I had legitimate excuses of like, I can't do it, I have to work, I have to keep paying these bills, and it got to this desperation point where it's like I literally had to just like, okay, if there is a God, He's gonna have to take care of this for me, because obviously He wants me to go to treatment, and if I lose everything, I lose everything. I mean, I've already lost my soul, like I have to do something to get it back. And, I mean, almost everything that I was afraid of losing, God has let me keep, and it's been a struggle. But I mean, I'm saved from my sins, and it's not this hypothetical down the road when I die, I'm gonna go to heaven thing. It's I'm not living in hell today anymore. I know that freedom that Christ brings, and Scott asked me outside, like, what is the gospel to you? And as he was talking, I'm like, it's relationships. That's what Christ did. Like, in the Old Testament, it was all this, it was that idea of the punishing God. But when Christ came, he came so we could have that personal relationship that I never got. I always knew of God. And my very spiritual family, and even my dad, like, he knows God, like, intimately to the heard him and stuff, you know, like legitimately, literally heard him. So, and I saw how much he changed. That relationship that my dad found with him changed him. And people talk about miracles, like physical miracles and stuff, but for me, the miracles are in the heart. How God changes people and not just, it's not out of a fear of like, oh, I'm going to be punished if I don't obey the rules, and this kind of more shallow idea that people that maybe not, I don't know, have that kind of intimate of an understanding, I guess, or just, I don't want to say understanding because that makes it sound so logical, but really it's the relationship. That's what I found. It's not knowing of God or about God, because you can study and you can know theology and yeah, you can read a lot of books and all this stuff, but knowing of God is not the same as knowing God. And it's just like having any relationship, because so many people say, well, I don't know how to put this. I'm trying to think about the relationship part. In the recovery program of Alcoholics Anonymous that I go through for helping me, you know, to recover from the addiction and stuff, that's the tool that God gave me to help me get out of that and to find Him. And one of the steps is, you know, to come and believe that there's a power greater than yourself that can restore you to sanity. And a lot of people really struggle with that step, and they want to, quote unquote, understand God before I'm going to like buy into this theory of God. And I try to explain to people that don't get it, it's like, just like your best friend, I can't just be like, I'm going to get to know Scott and then I'll have a relationship with him. Like, that's not how it works with God. Like, or any relationship, you have to be in it, and you have to spend time with Him and talk to Him, let Him talk to you. Like, it's just that relationship, and it just builds. And like, the more time that I've spent with God and just dumped everything on His table and just let Him like take over, the more I can trust Him. Just like a good friend, if you're new and afraid to like surrender to God, like, you don't have to just like be at that full 100% free fall of faith and trust. You just start with that little crack, and just, if you can't give your whole life to God, but you're a little bit curious, you give this part, just open the door a little bit, and you don't have to commit to anything. It's just like a relationship. Like, the more you get to know Him and the more you let Him in, just like your best friend that you have, or the person that you trust the most in your life, He will not let you down. So the more you give to Him little by little, the more you can trust Him. Or that's how it's worked for me. Just that trust just exponentially, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, to where, I mean, now it's to a point where it's like, almost the bigger of the issue is almost more of just like, instead of doubt, it instantly just goes, I shouldn't say instantly, but more and more quickly it gets to the point where like, wow, I cannot wait to see how God's going to handle this, because I've been through enough to know now that you can be excited when bad things are happening, because the darker it seems, just the brighter that light's going to be when God shows it. And before I went to treatment, Scott told me, I shared my story with Scott, and I didn't know that he had his own issues before, but he looked at me and he said, I'm so excited for you. And I wanted to punch him in the face, because it was, in my mind, the worst day of my life. That I got that low, that I had no control, anything. But he knew, because he'd been there, and he was seeing from the end of how God's worked in him, and it's just like, you can be excited in those bad times, because he could see that I'm not going to have to be the one to do it. And the more I would try to do it, the worse it would be. And the more I let God do it, the more it would end up like better than anything I could ever plan for myself. You know, I hear a lot of people will say stuff like, oh, God will give you anything you want. That's not true, because if I had all I wanted at the time, all I would ever had was an endless bottle of vodka and an empty room to sit in. God had way better plans for me than that. So he gave me the opposite of everything I wanted, because he knew my heart better than I did. He knew what I want more than I know what I want. And I'm still coming out of that. I mean, I'll never, like, be out of that, I guess. That part of me will always be with me, but I don't know. So if you want to know what the gospel is for me, it's the relationship. That real day-to-day, what's going to get me through this 24 hours, and what can I hold on to, and just seeing the miracles and all the things that other people may not see miracles in. Just being able to have gratitude for things that other people don't even consider in their day. I guess I can't talk about God without talking about my daughter too, because that was another one of those things that I never thought I wanted to have a kid. She's 3 now, and God's spoken to me so much through that little kid and that little face. And even with God, I'm not gonna lie. I mean, it's not always easy. I mean, even after I got sober, even with a relationship with God, there's times I've struggled to want to stay alive. To the point where I parked my truck in my garage and idled it. Just hope I'd fall asleep and not wake up. And that's what I wanted. Again, God doesn't give you what you want. He's got better plans. But every time I get to like these really like desperate times, it's always the proof that like I can't do it. I have to let go and let God, and I can't explain to somebody how to let go. I can't even get myself to let go, and I want to, but there's no trick in God. I know that. He won't. He ain't gonna come and take anything from you. You have to give it to him, because that's what love is. It's a choice to give. He ain't gonna make you love him. He ain't gonna make you trust him. You don't have to. You could sit and call him a piece of shit to his face if you want to. He'll let you. Because he loves you. He loves you to love in such a way that the person you love feels free, and that's that freedom, that's love. Otherwise it's rape. God ain't gonna come rape you. He ain't gonna take anything from you. So I can't fake that surrender, but every time I have surrendered, it's just, once I get to that point, like just everything is just like freedom. And yeah, getting back to my daughter, I didn't know like how I was gonna afford it. You have all these like what to the world seems like legitimate concerns. You know, money, I don't have time, and like just do what God wants you to do, and like it just ways happen, and I can't tell you how I do it. It just, things just happen. Like, I don't know, things will just happen, like, and usually through other people. That's how I've had God work through, or talk to me and show me his evidence is not in like my dad literally heard an audible voice of God. Like, I don't get those kind of miracles. I get like people coming through when I need them. This week's been hard. I'm not going to get into all what happened this week, but I was in a really a spot where I just really felt unloved, and even from God. Like, I was like, why are you, where are you, you know? Why do sometimes I feel like this massive presence just bursting out of me, and sometimes it's just dark. And then he come down and talk to me. He doesn't sit at the edge of my bed. He brings people into my life that show me that I am loved, and I know that it's just like his love working through them. Sometimes those people don't even realize that that's what that spirit is, and that's what that love is. But to me, that's what God is this source of infinite love, and that's all he knows how to do is just love and give. It's not. Love isn't something God does. Love is what God is. That's like, we're made of like atoms and protons and carbon, and God is just made of love, and that's all he can do because that's what he is. That's his essence. So even when people don't realize that God's working through them, like if they're inspired or wanting to help out in any way, like that's just God's love working through them. And sometimes being that recipient of that love is just important to the person giving it, because then they can realize how good it feels to love, because again, love is like a two-way thing. You know, there has to be a giver and a receiver, and if I don't know, I guess it just come back to the relationships, you know, that connection, I guess. I don't know. That's all I got. I just ran into a wall there, so that's what I got.